Hi and welcome back to the Escape Room Scholar. My name's Rob and today we'll be talking about some non-paper artifacts that we can use to enhance our educational escape rooms, increasing the realism a bit and reducing or minimizing the amount of suspension of disbelief we require to actually enjoy the activity. When I'm talking about non-paper artifacts, I can say these generally fall into two different categories. One would be props and one would be puzzles. And so let me talk about the differences between those, and then I've got a whole bunch of examples that I could give for each of those props and puzzles. Firstly, with props. Now, props are things that we place around the room or we use to decorate our room to make it look more, well, like the theme that we're dealing with. Indiana Jones's cave or on board a space shuttle or whatever it may be. Now, for a lot of us, and I'm a university professor, it's a bit difficult to do this. I'm shuttled from classroom to classroom and I don't have time. A class is literally finishing and then I'm coming in and teaching a class and then I'm leaving. So I don't have a great deal of time to completely transform my room into, well, something amazing. You may have the luxury of doing so. You may have a room that you have an hour or more to set up if you so wished. Or you might have a cave or something like that, not a literal stone cave, but one of those ones you can project things around the room. That could work quite well for this sort of thing, for setting up your environment. So I'm going to mostly focus on the non-paper artifacts for the puzzles, but I'll give a few examples of ones that are really quick to set up that you could use for a classroom that you've only got minutes or less time to actually set up. Then we come to the puzzles, which is the other part. And puzzles, I'm talking about things that are actually in the envelope. So often the examples I've given have been pieces of paper with clues and puzzles and all sorts of things on them. Well, it doesn't need to just be paper. It could be things that are non-paper things. And I've got a bunch of different examples to show for those. Now, with both of these, the puzzles and the props, one question we need to ask ourselves is, why is this here? Now, there should be a really logical, easy way to answer that. Otherwise, it probably shouldn't be there. So we shouldn't have artifacts that look like they're from ancient Egypt in an escape room that's an underwater or submarine escape room, for example. It just doesn't fit. And so we want our non-paper artifacts, whether they be props or puzzles, to actually enhance the escape room and increase the believability, decrease the suspension of disbelief, rather than actually say, oh, this just doesn't fit. Why is this even here? It doesn't make sense. Now, firstly, with props, this takes a bit of imagination. So if you had a Jurassic Park themed escape room, some sort of dinosaurs escaped or something like that, I've actually designed one of those, you might have some props. You might have one of those blow up dinosaurs that you can get off Amazon or eBay fairly cheaply, and that could be in the room, or someone could be wearing it walking around or something like that, creating a bit of tension or a bit of fun with the environment as well. If it was a spy theme, you could have a whole lot of different spy gadgets. One that I did recently was a security themed one where I was head of security, and so a little bit of jacket and hat actually puts me in the theme of being head of security, and I'm kind of the star of the show doing all the security briefings and things like that. That's one way to completely transform yourself from something that was business attire or something like that to, oh, now we're in character. Now something's actually changed, something's actually shifted there. One other thing you could do is get some of that caution tape or danger tape and string that around the room. That could serve for a crime scene. It could serve for some sort of a building site, some sort of a laboratory, a whole lot of different things that it could work in. You might be able to pick a room that's better suited to your environment. For example, if your escape room is set in a laboratory and you're working at a university where there's laboratories, that might be a good place to actually run the escape room in one of those rooms because it's the most like what you wanted to actually deal with originally. I remember reading a story about someone that created a full-scale escape room that was a bank vault-based one, and people were saying it's so realistic. And he said, well, it was easy because I actually did it in an old bank. And so we used the disused an actual real vault. They didn't have to make their own. No wonder it was realistic. Another thing you can do really quickly that kind of helps set the scene for the theme and the mood is actually play some background music. And this can create a bit of tension, and you just need some background music that's on theme. So you could search on YouTube, for example, for background music spy or background music space or background music jungle or something like that. And you'll get the sort of theme music that adds a bit of atmosphere to the room and the environment and blocks out some of the other white noise that's happening, like air conditioners and things like that. Helps aid that suspension of disbelief and add some believability into it. Okay, now let's talk about some puzzles. And I've got a box of different puzzle ideas here based on things that I've used in the past. Two key tools that are really helpful if you're making your own puzzles to have would be a laser cutter, which you can do some engraving with, and a 3D printer. Another thing that can be quite useful is making your own circuit boards or PCBs. And this isn't so much because you're getting into electronics and things like that, but if you're making things like cipher wheels, this particular one is a Caesar cipher wheel. This particular one is a Mexican Army cipher wheel. These are fiberglass boards with the printing on them. You can use something like EagleCAD to create your designs, and it makes them nice and robust. You can do these on paper, but they won't last that long. They last a lot better as fiberglass. These ones are several years old and they don't show it. There's no scratches or anything on them, and they keep up really well. But back to that 3D printing and the laser engraving or laser cutting, lots of different things you could do with them. If you've got a military themed escape room, you can buy off AliExpress or places like that some really cheap blank dog tags, which you can laser engrave, and they come up really nice. You can engrave clues on them. This one has the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 on the back for each of the different dog tags. You can get those in different colors as well. I've created an escape room recently that was a gear-based one, and so we actually 3D printed a series of gears that the students put together, and some of them would have rubber bands on them to act as belt drives, and they could work out how the gears mesh and actually build up gear trains and look at how those gear trains worked. Another escape room I recently built was using, it's a robotics-based one, and we actually 3D print this robotics armature here. It's just pieces of plastic, but they can actually move this into different locations and use a protractor and look at the angles on each of these different arms. This only costs cents to actually make, but it's a whole lot better than having bits of cardboard or bits of paper or something like that in an escape room. It provides a bit more realism and something that actually connects to the room a bit better. Now, talking about circuits and circuit boards and things like that, here's some I've created that actually teach students how to use oscilloscopes and multimeters. They actually plug it into a power source and actually test using a multimeter and oscilloscope various things like resistance between different terminals or peak-to-peak voltage or phase shifts between different signals. And so they're actually testing real equipment based on that, using those different things. Other things you could do is maybe print some ID cards or something like that. We use ID cards for licenses and smart access and things like that. That could be some sort of a clue in an escape room when you're looking at things. I've got an escape room coming out soon where we're doing that. You can laser engrave leather tags or bits of leather as some sort of an artifact, maybe something that had been ripped off someone's hat, or maybe on that leather you can put in a cipher, like a Caesar cipher or a Pigpen cipher, the key for that. All sorts of different artifacts that you could use to actually enhance your escape room that are not paper. They should last a bit longer, and they just add that extra dimension of interest to the escape room. Now, aside from actually physically making things yourself using like a 3D printer or a laser cutter, there's lots of different things that you could use that you could either use as is or have them customized to whatever escape room you need as part of a clue. For example, you can buy at the promotions places the sort of things that fill up conferences with custom pens and USB sticks and fidget spinners, all those sort of things. You could have them printed with various clues for your escape room to actually make it part of the room and make it fit together as a cohesive whole. And there's lots of other things there you could use as well, your lanyards, your custom water bottles and things like that. But one tip, make sure you order a few more than what you probably need, partly because you might get extra students than you originally expected, but also partly that these things don't last forever. Often they're not kind of bulletproof, they're not made to last forever, and so some will probably break over time and you'll need to replace them. Now, hopefully these ideas help you think through what you can do going just beyond paper. Paper is a great first step, but how can you make your escape room a bit more realistic, a bit more three-dimensional, and a bit more, well, requiring a bit less suspension of disbelief to really enjoy the escape room and get into the escape room. That's all for now. Happy escaping.